Listen to a discussion in an advertising class.
Morning, class. In our last class, we were talking about regulation in the advertising industry. In fact, you may remember I said that in the United States, in some European countries too, advertising is one of the most heavily regulated industries there is. What example did I give of regulation, government regulation of advertising?
Well, you gave the example of that the United States banned cigarette advertising back in the 1960s.
The early 1970s, actually. That's right. Up until then, tobacco companies and their advertising agencies would portray smoking as part of this carefree, this so glamorous lifestyle. And then it came out in these scientific studies done by the government that tobacco smoking was really dangerous, really unsafe. And so, no more tobacco advertisements. At least not on television or radio. You could still advertise in magazines, on billboards, and so on for a long time after that. Don't ask me why, but you could. And some studies showed that the studies seem to indicate that the advertising ban. Oh, and I might mention there was also negative advertising by the government and anti-smoking groups telling people not to smoke. Anyway, these studies show that the use of tobacco actually went down. Okay, there were also some examples in the article I asked you to read for today. Other examples of government regulation?
There was the example from Sweden about how Sweden completely banned advertisements for children.
Right, for children under 12. That happened back in 1991. Now, not to get too far off track here, but since that article was written, there was a European Court of Justice ruling, and it said that Sweden still has to accept that it has no control over advertisements that target Swedish children, advertisements that come from neighboring countries or from satellite. So this undercuts to a certain extent what the Swedes were trying to do, but still, you can see their intent to protect their children from the effects of advertising.
Don't you think that law was a little extreme, maybe?
In my opinion, as a matter of fact, yes, I do. Personally, I think advertisements meant for children should be controlled, maybe controlled more carefully than at present, but not necessarily eliminated. And speaking for myself still, I think they should be controlled by a combination of government regulation and self-regulation. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sometimes self-regulation works well enough, but if the idea of self-regulation is to create nothing but honest advertisements that are in good taste, well, you only have to turn on your TV and you'll see that this system of self-regulation has its faults, right?
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 6. What is the class mainly discussing? Listen to a lecture in a world literature class.
So, for the rest of the class today, we're going to talk about the two most important poems, epic poems, in Greek literature. And really not just in Greek literature, but in any literature, anywhere in the world. These are the Iliad and the Odyssey, written by the blind Greek poet Homer. At least we think he was blind. Now, if you happen to have a copy of the syllabus that I gave you last week, you'll notice that we're not going to be able to... We just don't have time to read all of these two poems and talk about them. An epic poem, I probably don't have to tell you this, is a narrative poem, a really long narrative poem. So we're going to read a few passages from the Iliad, and we'll read a bit more from the Odyssey. What I want to talk about today are some of the ways these two long poems, especially their main characters, how they're different. Some people have said that the Iliad is the world's greatest war story, and the Odyssey that it's the world's greatest travel story. The Iliad tells about the Trojan War, the war between Troy and the various Greek kingdoms. The Odyssey tells about a Greek warrior's trip home and all the amazing adventures he has on the way. And he has some wild ones, too. The warrior's name is Odysseus, hence the name for the poem. I think the reason that I prefer the Odyssey to the Iliad myself is that, well, I guess you could say I just like the main character of the Odyssey better than the main characters of the Iliad. As I said, the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War and about the clash, the personality conflict between the main characters. The conflict isn't just between warriors from either side. A lot of the story deals with an argument between the two strongest Greek warriors, Achilles and Agamemnon. Anyway, the main characters in the Iliad, they're strong, they're great warriors, but they're not as clever, not as smart as Odysseus. He's the one who thinks up the plan to end the war after 10 long years and defeat the Trojans. He's the mastermind behind the scheme to build the Trojan horse. You probably know something about that already. The Trojan horse has been in lots of movies and so on. Anyway, he helps end the 10-year war, and then he sets off for home and his family. It takes him another 10 years to get home, where his wife has been waiting faithfully for him for 20 years. But like I said, he has plenty of adventures on the way. Oh, and the other thing about Odysseus that I like is that, well, the characters in the Iliad are pretty static. You know what I mean? They don't change much. This is true of most of Homer's characters, in fact, but it's not true of Odysseus. During the course of the epic, on account of the long war and all the bizarre experiences he has on the way home, he changes. He evolves as a character, just like characters in most modern novels do. Okay then, before we go on, does anyone have any comments? Comments or questions?
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 7. What is the main point of this lecture?